Jerry DeWitt's ministry began at the age of 17. He evangelized throughout the United States and assisted in 3 Pentecostal churches. Later, he held the pastorate of 2 fundamentalist congregations. After more than 25 years of ministry, he realized he had become an atheist. That's a little bit of a game changer. In 2011, he became the first graduate of the Clergy Project, and later that year was appointed to the Directorship of Recovering from Religion. Jerry's memoir, Hope After Faith, was recently published by Capo Press. Please welcome my soul brother, Mr. Jerry DeWitt.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. It's a Sunday morning. I don't know about you, but I hate the hell out of them. I even did whenever I was pastoring. I thought there's got to be something different about this. Matter of fact, the very first church that I was the senior pastor of, one of the reasons I fell in love with it was because they had service on Thursday nights instead of Wednesday nights. That way, you could try to steal from other churches. And at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, so you could sleep in, and it made us very popular. And some of those deacons talked me out of that beautiful arrangement and had me change it, and it all went downhill from there. So I'm so honored and thrilled that you've come out this morning. We had something. I've got good news and bad news, Catherine.
Yes.
The good news is it looks like I'm going to have to preach before all of this is over with. That's when you clap. The bad news is unless he has just appeared, our guest of honor actually hasn't shown up.
Oh.
Yes. So is he coming? Did somebody think that he's coming? So, Catherine, you're going to be entertainment for a couple of moments. Why don't you talk to us? Why don't you talk to us all the way from Canada about the Clergy Project?
Sure. So for those of you who probably don't know me, which is probably the entire room, my name is Catherine Dunphy, and I'm the Executive Director for the Clergy Project. Yay, Clergy Project. Since you all know Jerry, you have a kind of a taste of what the Clergy Project is. So we're a group of about 500 now, almost 500, active and former clergy persons. I used to be a Roman Catholic chaplain. Obviously, I wasn't ordained because I'm a woman, and they just wouldn't have me. But I got out of there as fast as I could. So today, Todd is on his way. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background information on why the Clergy Project is thanking Todd today. He very generously, and his foundation, the Steeple Free Thought Foundation, donated $100,000 to the Clergy Project in February to help us, to help our members who are trying to get out of ministry to get into secular employment. And so working with Todd, he gave us some suggestions of some companies we could work with, some outplacement service companies, and we went into, we've created a relationship with one of these companies, Rise Smart, and they're providing services to Clergy Project members to help them to take their skills in ministry. I can't hear you all, by the way. They're helping to take the skills in ministry and translate them into secular employment. So because of Todd's generosity and his innovative thought, we now have this fantastic program to help Clergy Project members find jobs outside of ministry.
I think that's a good thing. So what Catherine had desired to do today was to present a card to Todd in appreciation. That's what you get for $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's much like every other event you've ever been involved in. But we truly wanted, from the heart of the Clergy Project, and in particular the Clergy Project board members, we wanted to express our appreciation, because this is a true boots on the ground, changing lives type of contribution that Todd is known for. So what we have is, we have a Todd substitute. They look for the second tallest person in the room. So Todd didn't shave this morning. So Todd, we want to give you this great card and give you our sincere appreciation.
I'll do my best, Todd, and say thank you.
You're welcome. Give Todd a hand clap. It wasn't Todd, Catherine.
No.
It wasn't Todd.
No.
He's not here. So obviously, it's not hard to imagine why we would want to do something like this. If you've been following the story, hopefully you've read this little book called Hope After Faith.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Then you will realize exactly how difficult it is for a clergy member to completely turn his life around. Many lifelong atheists do not understand why it's such a big deal. And, of course, the reason they don't is because they've been lifelong atheists or they live in a part of the country where it's not that big of a deal. But I'm sure most people in this room understand just how big of a deal it is. And for a minister, I like to say it's the equivalent for a U.S. soldier turning and working for Al-Qaeda as far as Christians are concerned, right? That's pretty well a pretty good explanation. So, go to the little town of DeWitt, Louisiana, where there's only 10,000 people and be the only person working for the enemy. So, it's difficult. And unfortunately, many of the skills are not transferable into the secular world. So Todd's contribution allows us to hire a third party that can make those skills more transferable. So one last time for Catherine, are you going to mind hanging around for just a few minutes? You can watch me preach from behind.
Sure, that's
Everybody's going to think you're staring at my butt.
Well, actually, I see your face.
Oh, that's true. Well, that may be better. I'm not sure. But one last time, let's give Catherine and Todd Stiefel and the Clergy Project a big hand of applause. So, since Todd is not here, I'm going to preach for a minute, and then maybe Catherine and I can both take questions, if that's all right. And yeah, okay, maybe. And when I say preach, I don't know so much that I'm going to fall into a full-blown Sam Singleton or anything, because it's so stinking early. And, y'all all drank, I didn't, and for some reason my head hurts and you're smiling. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe you know a secret. But I do have something that I want to deliver completely off the cuff, and so that you can remember it in true preacher style, I will give it some catchy little title, if you'll give me about 3 seconds to think of it. Since we were talking about Todd Stiefel, then I want to title this next couple of moments, 10,000 Tiny Todds. Yeah, you can clap on that. Thank you. 10,000 Tiny Todds and the difference that they can make. You may or may not realize at this moment that there are authors all throughout this room. How many have a book? All right, there's books everywhere. What I'm learning as I begin to experiment and go through my trials and tribulations of the publishing industry is that it really doesn't take a whole lot of books to make a huge impact in the media. And for that matter, it doesn't take a whole lot of money to make a huge impact in the media. So what the movement really needs, it needs 10,000 Tiny Todds that are able to focus and campaign for singular issues very effectively. And so think about this for just a moment. A few weeks ago, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, an extremely religious state, we decided that we would have, as it were, a coming out party. We would have this dreadful, horrible thing called a secular church service. And we strategically planned on doing it in the capital, or next to the capital, in the capital city of Louisiana, so that it would draw the attention of the legislators, so that it would draw the attention of the media. Because we felt like in this extremely religious environment, particularly in Louisiana, where creationism is being forced down the educational throat system, what we realized was that if we could somehow make a splash, then we would be able to have our voice heard for a moment. So what I want to say to you for the next few moments is, it doesn't take $100,000. It doesn't take a Todd Stiefel. What it takes is 10,000 Tiny Todds to make a major difference. A very gracious person by the name of Paul Schmidt decided from Texas that he would fund our service. Now this service was elaborate, and it was in a gorgeous hotel right under the shadow of the Capitol, all intentional. And it cost us $7,000 for this one service. One service, $7,000. But the very next morning, I'm about to start preaching. Here we are. Here's this little ruddy backwoods black dirt, Pentecostal preacher, if you will, standing in front of about 100 secular folks, listening to What a Wonderful World playing in the background, clapping our hands. Some people raised their hands. Most didn't, but having this Pentecostal-esque service right under the shadow of the Capitol, seemingly unimportant to so many people, yet with that $7,000 investment and the investment of the time and energy of those 100 plus folks, the very next morning, our service was in the New York Times. So if you add the energy of the people who were involved and the $7,000 that Paul Smith invested, we bought coverage in the New York Times for $7,000. That's how important what you're doing really is, and how it's able to catch the attention of the major media. So it's not just that we need to try to find another Todd Stiefel or as many Todd Stiefels as we can. What we really need is 10,000 tiny Todds all working together and focused on one particular issue. The books that are already out, my book, the books that are coming out. If we were to campaign and decide as a collective body, just 10,000 of us, that is 0.08% of us. 0.08% of us. If 10,000 tiny Todds all decided that they would buy the same secular book the same week off of Amazon, you would have an atheist bestseller. Can I get a Darwin? So that means whenever people who aren't atheists or people who are trying to find their way, people that are maybe looking at secular values, when they walk into Books A Million or Barnes & Noble, they will be forced to see our values setting on the bestseller shelf. That's the power of 10,000 tiny Todds. The second way that I think we can continue to grow and we can continue to move forward by emulating Todd Stiefel, 10,000 tiny Todds, all embodying humanistic values. And I know that's not a pretty word to some people, but it's a beautiful word to me, because it's not what we don't believe in, it's what we do believe in. It's not what we're against, it's what we're for. It's not what we're no longer doing, it's what we are now doing. The world is not looking for what we no longer hold or what we've discarded or which books on our shelves are dusty, but instead, what the world is ready to embrace are the books that are no longer dusty and the actions that are fresh and clean and bright. What the world is looking for is a movement that is not stepping away from something, but stepping into something. What the world is looking for is not a group of people pointing back to the Dark Ages and saying that's what Christianity did to us. Instead, what the world is looking for is a movement that is pointing forward and says the next age is going to be bright and beautiful and brilliant, and it will be filled with humanistic values. Can I get a Darwin? I find it very interesting to figure out what it is that we've moved out from, but what I'm looking for is what are we moving into? And if there's one thing that Todd Stiefel's known for, it's for being a humanist. And I think the more that we express our values and our love for humanity, the more we embrace each other, the more that we develop community. In just a few minutes, Greg's going to get up and talk about developing community, if I'm not mistaken. And so the more that we develop community, the more that we show that we've got something to offer. I don't know about you, but I'm just sick and tired of people sitting in dark corners blogging away about how Christianity sucks. Let's create something better than Christianity. So the last way, and I'll stop preaching after this, for today, for the next few moments. The last and maybe the most important way that 10,000 tiny Todds can make a difference is to learn to balance between the movement and the moment. And this is where I'm going to pastor for just a minute, whether you like it or not, but it'll be free, so. Do you truly appreciate where you're at and what you're doing? It's easy. If you're one of the volunteers, one of the many beautiful volunteers within the movement, then probably you have more on your plate than what you're able to get accomplished on any given day. And it runs away with you. And some of you will be glad when this stinking conference is over with, so that you can take a breather and rest and focus on other parts of your life. I want to challenge you for just a moment. Yeah, that's preacher language. Get over it. It's also the English language. I want to challenge you for just a moment to balance out your position in the movement and the moment that you're experiencing in your lives. The moment that you're experiencing in history. I know that not all of us can be bestsellers. I sure hope I can be one. Come on, 10,000 Tiny Tots. Get a campaign and buy the book this week. There's hope after faith. Not all of us can be bestsellers. Not all of us can be authors. Not all of us can lead groups. Not all of us can do all these things. But all of us are experiencing a moment, not just in American history, but in world history, that will never be repeated again. You're making that possible. You are shaking the hands. You're hugging the necks of the leaders of not the dark age, but of the age of enlightenment that is to come. You're participating in a fantastic moment. 50 years from now, whenever your great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren are reading about this moment in history, your name may not be on the page, but when it talks about that organization, and it talks about the power of that movement, and it talks about how we transcended above religion and developed global community, you're going to feel what we called in the Pentecostal movement doodads. You're going to feel goosebumps. You're going to read pages in the future where the hair on the back of your neck's going to stand up, because you're going to know that it was your involvement that made that possible, that you changed the world, that you saved the planet, that you took the human species to a better place. Can I get a Darwin? So I challenge you, balance your work within the movement to your appreciation of the moment. Because if we're right, this is not a dress rehearsal. And you better savor every piece of chocolate you put in your mouth. Thank you. So we've got about 3 minutes. Any questions while we still have Catherine from Canada up on the screen? Yes, ma'am.
As someone that was raised without faith ever, how do I, as a leader, help someone transition from a period of really intense faith, especially being in a place in the South?
Catherine, could you hear that?
Very faintly. Can you repeat the question, Jerry?
So as a leader, but a leader who was never in faith, never lived a life of faith, how can she help people within her group that were brought up and raised in faith? How can she bridge that gap, having never been there herself?
Well, I would say it may be a bit hard to empathize with an individual who's going through the struggle of, transitioning out of faith and has family members that are still tied to a religious tradition, and dealing with the difficulties that they may encounter. But I would think that a person that is a secularist now, or a humanist now, or an atheist now, or identifies that way, would really just want someone to listen. And I don't think, yes, ministers or chaplains or pastors or priests or nuns, they had, they sat and we sat and we listened to many people talk about their challenges and their difficulties, but I don't think there's anything that would inhibit anyone who's at this conference from being able to listen and to provide a shoulder to lean on or to cry on. That's part of what makes, that's part of our humanity, is our willingness to reach out. So I would say you may not understand everything exactly, right? Like Jerry is as fantastic as he is a pastor. He doesn't necessarily understand what it's like to be a woman, but he can still appreciate, he can still listen, he can still provide support, and that's the important thing, is that listening. that component. So just be open to do that. And I know that might be a challenge for some people because of artificial barriers that we erect to keep us in our roles or to protect ourselves. But an openness to embrace. I love by the way, I'm just going to throw this in there. I love the Hug an Atheist Day. I think that's fantastic. We need more of that. We really do.
Very good. Maybe one more? Did I preach that well? There's no more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes I very much enjoyed your preaching. I think most of the people in this room did. But there are not a small number of atheists, humanists who grew up in a church and found it a very, very negative experience.
Certainly.
And as a result, they're really concerned about emotionalism in the atheist community.
Right.
They're a minority, but there are enough of them to really thwart some very good. And
Sure.
I'd like comments on how to deal with that, how to help these people feel comfortable.
Sure. Did everybody hear that question? Okay, so there obviously is a sect that has been so offended or so, for lack of better words, emotionally damaged by the emotionalism within religion that they find, even things hopefully as benign as what I do. You think I'm preaching now? I'll send you a tape. But find what we do, and even the emotional side of community, of trying to create things like secular church services and all that kind of stuff, to be a bother. For me, something that I wish there was a way to make clearer, but it's almost impossible to do because you use the platform that you're given. For me, my real message is about individualism. It just so happens that my atheism has brought to my awareness how individualism is not actually allowed in the 21st century in the United States of America to the degree that it should have been. So if I was actually promoting a message or evangelizing for a cause, it would be that in the 21st century, everyone's identity was able to be freely expressed. So the reason I say that is for people who are uncomfortable with that, then my core message of everyone should be free to be themselves naturally responds by saying they shouldn't partake of that. They shouldn't be forced to partake of that. They shouldn't have to feel as if they're obligated to partake in something that they're uncomfortable with. And obviously, there's already many programs and many infrastructures that are already created that literally push back against emotionalism. So I think they'll always have a place to be and always have a home to be comfortable. Yes, sir.
Is your book available for purchase in the lobby?
To my knowledge, it will be. Thank you very much. I love you. Thank you. Everybody give Catherine